Welcome in the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for finding us on your favorite podcast app. We're on Spotify, we're on Podbean, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on Apple Podcasts. Of course, we're also on Dash Radio on their Nothing But Net channel every single night at 7 p.m. Also, check out Five Reasons YouTube for all of our other Heat programming. We're going to have a bunch of Dolphins programming coming up soon, so make sure you check that out. We're close to 13,000 subscribers. We got a new initiative that's going to be pretty cool. We're going to be announcing here in the next couple of days. Also, check out 5reasonsports.com, 5reasonsports.com. Spell that one out. Brady Hawk toiling every day, writing 16 articles. Make sure you check all of them out. They don't have a paywall. And also check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. You got to be playing Prize Picks. We just started a new Prize Picks show, myself, David Friedman, and David Eversole on the channel. Use that code 5. Use the code 5 to play daily fantasy every single day on the NBA playoffs. You can also do it on MLB, MLS, NHL, and everything else that's going on in sports. Pair players together, do the power play, do the flex play, depending on how much you want to bet and how deep into it you want to get. So play prizepicks.com. But I always say this, use that code 5, F-I-V-E, for prizepicks.com, and you will get a bonus. And now, today's episode. All right, Ethan Skolnick back on 5 on the Floor. Kids, don't cut yourself shaving. If you're watching this on YouTube, that's what that is. I don't want to bleed out during the program. Here is today's floor plan. We've got Greg Sylvander. We've got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. And we've got Adam Borai. I don't know where you can follow him these days, but it doesn't really matter. All right, let's get to it, right? We all agree on that. All right, this is going to be a heavy kind of news nugget episode. That's why we have Adam here. Make sure you check out our Down Bad episodes. The last 2 episodes we did, Down Bad in the front court, Down Bad in the back court. Who are some players that the Heat could look at to try to rejuvenate their careers? None of you really liked any of the options. And so we're going to move to what's actually going on right now. I'm going to start today. Here are some things I've heard, okay, from more than one source, which is typically the way that I do this. Some of this we've discussed before, and so this is just an update for people who have followed this. One is we reported about 10 days ago that the Heat are prepared to offer Jimmy Butler the max extension, the max, the 4-year max. They don't have hesitations about this. They want Jimmy to be, a fulcrum of the organization going forward. So for people who had concerns about that, that is going to be offered. And at some point this offseason, and Jimmy Butler, my understanding, is going to take it. Okay, so that's where we start. Okay, Jimmy Butler and the extension. The second thing is we talked a lot about how there are 2 players that they're building this organization around, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. My understanding is that has not changed. Those are the 2 core players. Anybody else who's described as a core player is not really a core player. They could be, but they're not necessarily a core player. Now, where does that leave Duncan Robinson and Kendrick Nunn? My understanding is the Heat are prepared to allow Kendrick Nunn to test the market. With Duncan Robinson, they're likely going to try to get a deal done before he goes out into the market. I think it will come in somewhere in the $15 million a year range, maybe a little bit higher than that. I can tell you that in terms of highest priority, Erik Spoelstra built his offense in large part around Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson is a huge priority for Erik Spoelstra, and I believe that that is going to be accommodated and that Duncan Robinson is going to be retained, or at least the Heat are going to attempt to retain him before he hits the market. Where does that leave Tyler Herro? Tyler Herro could be back, but also Tyler Herro could be moved. And we're going to discuss with Adam and Greg and Alex here whether that's a smart thing to do this offseason. But I would not declare Tyler Herro a core player right now. I think he could be, but I would not put him in that category. And remember, the Pat Riley press conference, when he started it, he talked about 2 core players. When he was asked about Tyler Herro, he added him as a core player. That's different from the way he set the agenda in the press conference. The other thing that I've heard is the Heat are going to try to add a big this offseason, and that is a Pat Riley priority, and that should not surprise anybody. Now, we talked about some bigs in the last episode, our down big bigs or down bad bigs. We mentioned some names. I have heard Steven Adams is a possibility. One of the names that we discussed. Another name that I would watch, however, is Andre Drummond, who finished the career, not his career, but his season last year with the Lakers. Didn't work out so well. The Lakers had promised him a starting job. Remember, there were some issues there in terms of Marc Gasol believing that he should be starting. A lot of Laker fans believe that Marc Gasol or maybe even Montrezl Harrell should be starting. But Andre Drummond is still on the Heat's radar. That's my understanding. That doesn't rule out Dwayne Dedmon, but adding a big who could start next to Bam, not necessarily start, because we know Erik Spoelstra likes to go smaller and play kind of wings at the 4 spot with Bam at the 5, but someone who could start will be a priority for Pat Riley, even if it is, part of or maybe all of an exception, like the mid-level exception. The other thing that I've heard, and we're going to discuss this going forward from an NBA perspective, and this is from more than one person, I would watch what's going on in Portland. The Blazers got eliminated in the first round by the Nuggets. 2 different things are happening there. One is they're conducting a coaching search. Chauncey Billups, Becky Hammond, Dawn Staley, Mike D'Antoni, some of the names that have been mentioned out there. I would not be surprised, and I don't have any information that they've done this at this point, so aggregators, stand back. I would not be surprised, though, if they put Erik Spoelstra on their radar for more than just head coach. We all know that the ties that Spoelstra has to that area. We all know that his father worked in that front office at one point, obviously different group and everything else, but I would not be surprised if he ends up on their radar. That's all I can say. I'm not there. No offer has been made, nothing along those lines. Please don't aggregate it that way, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's on their radar. I also don't have any indication that Erik Spoelstra is looking to leave the Miami Heat. In fact, I've heard the opposite from sources that I've checked with here over the past 24 hours. But I just want to throw that out there. The other thing to watch with Portland is the Dame Lillard situation. And how do I quite put this? Dame has been one of the most loyal people in the entire NBA as far as wanting to stay with his franchise. He's not asking out at this point. I know that for a fact. But I will say that the door is more cracked open from what I've heard than it has ever been during his tenure in Portland. And that a lot of it is going to be based on what happens with the coaching search, which has been reported in some circles, and also what happens generally with the organization. I can also tell you, though, that if Dame Lillard leaves Portland, one of the places that I've been told would be attractive is Miami. Whether you can make a deal happen is an entirely another question. Okay. That's what we've got. Who wants to jump in?
Sheesh.
Wow, it's hard to follow that. Where do we start? So what was the first thing you said here?
We might have to organize this.
Yeah, I know.
Sure. I organized it on a pad.
You did organize. So let's go back to the top of that
meeting
pad.
before I came on.
So the Jimmy Max extension, that I feel like we all felt like that was happening. So we can move on from that. That's not much conversation. But the Duncan thing I think is really interesting. So there's almost like it's almost like I'll scratch your back, but then I'm going to make sure my back gets scratched as well in terms of taking care of Duncan, but then going and getting a big. I find that super interesting. Andre Drummond would not be at the top of my list, but you know how they circle back to guys that they were interested in, and they were interested in Andre Drummond. That was reported outside of our network.
Yes.
So that's also interesting to me, although I think I would prefer Dwayne Dedmon. I may look stupid for saying that 12 months from now, but that's where I stand today. My initial reactions on all the other stuff, I want to pause and give someone else the chance to jump in here so I don't just ramble for the next 15 minutes because, man, there's some meaty stuff to unpack there.
Alex, Adam, who wants to jump in? Alex, you go first, and we'll see what Adam adds to this.
It's hard to pick about what to talk about here because I think the Kendrick and Duncan stuff kind of falls in line with I think kind of what you would imagine they would do is that they would be a little bit more willing to see what Kendrick can get out of the market, whereas Duncan, it's like, how valuable he is to the offense, like you talked about before. It seems like that's somebody you want to wrap that up with, quickly and not let it, blow over and get even worse money-wise. I feel like they can work something out before he gets to the free agent market there. Now, as far as all the other stuff you dropped in there, like I first of all, you pleading with aggregators to not aggregate your stuff when you have some gold on you is hilarious. And
it's not gold, it's silver. Because they're not going to aggregate it correctly. That's the whole thing. You know how this is going to get aggregated in the morning.
You were totally transparent about all this stuff. I don't think that anybody couldn't necessarily maybe have seen the Spoelstra stuff coming. I think that if they were to get
you don't think so? Again, nothing's happened to my understanding. I don't I'm not reporting, and I want to be clear on that. I'm not reporting that anything has happened.
For sure.
You're surprised that they would have interest? I always felt they would have interest.
No.
If there was openings,
The exact
right?
opposite. I'm saying that I don't think it's a surprise. I think that we
Okay.
could have foresaw that would be a landing spot for Spo had he ever disconnected from Miami. But when I kind of poked around on this today, I was told that money won't be the factor. Like they want to keep Spoelstra in Miami. I know he loves it there. You talk about Portland being home. I mean, he's been in Miami in the video room since 96 or whatever. I mean, was it before that actually? So I don't know. I'm less worried about the Spoelstra stuff, and the Dame stuff is really intriguing.
Let's go to the Dame stuff, Adam, from a league perspective here. What is your understanding? Because there's a couple different reasons why I've been led to believe that Dame would be open to leaving at this point. I think you've heard some of the same reasons. I don't want to get into a ton of the specifics to kind of throw, some people out there right now. But what is your understanding kind of where he is?
I mean, from what I was told a few weeks back was basically exactly what you just said. The door is now cracked a little bit open. Not that it's wide open, not that there's anything imminent, not that there's a trade request coming, but it's always been that the door was locked shut, and the key thrown away. But now the door is a little bit open. Now other teams could be, coming in and, sniffing around on the situation. But outside of that, there's nothing going on. I do think that it's interesting that we saw a report a few days ago that Dame is willing to look at what Portland does this offseason first, because we've seen time and time again with James Harden, with Kyrie a few years ago, that these players request trades after the offseason really completes, and it takes a lot of teams out of the running. So that could have an effect on Miami and their pursuit of, say, Kyle Lowry.
A great point.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to mention one thing here again on the Lillard thing, because we're going to talk about this in the Lowry context. Because to get back to Kyle Lowry, the interest is still strong. Nothing has changed there. I still believe that the most likely scenario for the Miami Heat this offseason is that Kyle Lowry is their new point guard. If you were asking me to put money on it right now, that's still where I think
everyone
would go
on this
with
podcast
would. I think we all agree on that. With that said, the one thing about Lillard that I can say is that, again, watch the coaching situation there. Watch the coaching situation, because if there are certain guys, and this is not including Spoelstra, obviously, this is the candidates that have been publicly announced, okay? Or we know D'Antoni's interviewing there. We know Chauncey Billups. But just watch it, because if you see candidates that don't go there, that you thought might go there, that usually gives you an indication that the player they would be going there to coach may want out of the situation and may not be available to coach. And I bring you back to 2014. And this was reported by Le Batard, but also, I spoke to Pau Gasol about this directly in a locker room in Columbus before a Bulls-Cavs preseason game, where I said to him, what happened with Miami? Because he signed, of course, with the Bulls. And he said, he didn't say that LeBron told him, I'm leaving, but LeBron did tell him, Pau told me specifically, he said, LeBron told me, I don't know that I'm staying. It's different, a little bit of difference in terms of nuance, but he said, don't come necessarily because of me. And that we all know that Gasol ended up signing with the Bulls, and obviously LeBron was gone. Adam, before we get to a quick break here, you got one thing?
Yeah, for anyone that's listening and really, really likes Damian Lillard and likes the potential of him being moved, you need to watch Chris Haynes of Yahoo Sports.
Yes.
Just watch him.
No question.
Just enjoy his reporting, and just that's all you got to say.
No, well, I mean, look, I've said it before, and I'm friends with Chris. I mean, I covered the Cavs with Chris in his first year in Cleveland, and obviously developed a relationship with the Clutch folks and everything else. And Chris has done very well in his career, and he's now obviously with TNT and Yahoo. But yeah, Chris built his career at first with a relationship with Dame Lillard in Portland. And so when Dame wants to say something, he goes to Chris Haynes. And I'm not spilling the beans on anybody here. I mean, Chris is very open about his relationship with Dame, and Dame is very public with his comments. Dame interacts on Twitter probably more than any superstar in the entire league. So, but yes, watch Chris Haynes. Absolutely. 1000%. But also watch the coaching candidates. If you see guys who you think would be a good fit with Dame Lillard and they turn down interviews or they don't end up sort of going to the second interview, might be an indication that he's given them an indication that he may not necessarily be there. I also would watch CJ McCollum too, because obviously that will play into it. All right, we're going to get into the Lowry situation a little more specifically because something Adam mentioned, I think, is something we need to break down here. Before we do, want to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's our friend Mark Brown. You can find him at markbrownpa.com. We've told you before about how you get that $295 deal when you're selling your house or whatever you're doing. You need to work with a title company. He's got a title company right there in-house in his law firm right there in North Lauderdale, just north of Cypress Creek off of Andrews, but also you need to do some estate planning. This is the guy that you go to. He's also a huge Heat fan, Dolphin fan, so you can talk to him about all that stuff. And more importantly, he'll get your affairs in order here. If you're young with a family, you need to meet with him so you can set up plans for your kids if anything unfortunate ever happens. If you're older with a family, it's important you meet so your family can avoid disputes when you eventually pass. So Mark Brown, PA, again, a small firm, allows them to be focused on their clients, and they remain always available. Additionally, they work with a ton of real estate with their title company, as I mentioned, so they're experts in handling land or property assets. So it's markbrownpa.com. That's with a C, M-A-R-C, brownpa.com, 954-566-5678. That's 954-566-5678, 954-566-5678, markbrownpa.com, estate planning, and also a title company right there in-house. All right, let's get to, Adam, what you were talking about with Lowry and Lillard, because we have seen in recent years that the Heat sometimes will wait for the big kill, right? And in 2010, that worked, right? Like they didn't take on some assets. Lamar Odom, they almost did it. Lamar said no, but they didn't take on some players who could have helped Dwayne during what turned out to be his absolute prime, right? Because they were waiting for this score in 2010, this grand plan that Andy and Pat had kind of charted, and it worked. They got the best player in the world, and they got, a top 15 player, and they were able to retain their own top 10 player. We've also seen it not work. This last offseason, they made a decision not to go with years with Jay Crowder, who's now in the Western Conference Finals, or anybody else, and to wait for Giannis, which turned out to be a pipe dream that ultimately didn't happen. How would you evaluate, like, if Kyle Lowry says to you, I'm ready to come, and you're like, well, I want to see what Dame's going to do. Like, how did the Heat handle that situation?
Well, it's tough because if you look at what their plan was for 2021, it was save as much cap as possible so that you could have a chance at a Paul George, at a Kawhi, at a Giannis, and obviously all those guys are almost gone. Sans Kawhi, but with Kyle Lowry, it's really interesting. We've seen in the past few years with James Harden, with Kyrie Irving, like I mentioned earlier, these guys waited to see what their teams did and then asked out. And by then, a lot of those teams that would have been in the running were not, because they don't have the cap space. They just signed a guy in the same position. So what do? Do you sign a Kyle Lowry who says, I'm ready to come right now? Or do you wait for the pipe dream, because it's still a pipe dream, of Damian Lillard? And would you even have enough to get Damian Lillard? So I think the way you have to approach it is you straight up ask whoever is closest to Dame, is this realistic? And if the answer is no, you sign Kyle.
But they had a working relationship with the agent for Giannis through Bam, and still
agents have other agendas.
I understand that. Trust me, I get that. Okay, I've been working with agents for 25 years. But I'm just saying, I mean, they have other agendas when they're giving me information. I know that. Okay. When you're being used, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, if they were ever going to be plugged into a situation, that was the one they were going to be plugged into. Right. And so I'll ask this, let's just look from a basketball perspective. Okay. how Alex do you get Dame Lillard with the lack of assets that you have? I mean, they don't, right? I mean, unless he was to say, I'm only going to play in Miami. And even then, like, does Portland, I mean, he's been very good to Portland, but I mean, that's a big ask. Like, I mean, the only assets you have. The other point I want to make, and I should have made this point in the beginning, they're going to retain Duncan Robinson. That's my belief. Or in other words, they're going to sign him, but it doesn't necessarily mean they'll keep him, if that
Very
makes
tradable
sense.
figure.
In other words, right? I mean, so I don't think they're going to let that. And again, I hate calling players assets, but like, they're not going to let that asset go. I don't believe. Okay. I just don't.
40% 3-point shooters always have value.
Absolutely. So I don't think they're just going to let Duncan walk, but that does not necessarily mean they wouldn't include Duncan in a deal to get Dame Lillard. But even with that, like Tyler Herro and Duncan Robinson and what? I mean, you don't have any picks.
Well, I mean, look, I think you got to start with that, right? I think I love that point that you're making there, that just because they signed him doesn't mean he won't be traded. And that's why I've always been for signing him, just because I think, I see the value that he brings to this team. And I think he could bring a similar value to a bunch of other winning teams. He's that good. He's that elite at what he does. And specifically, that whatever figure he decides and the Heat decide to sign him at, it's going to be extremely tradable. Like, you need those big numbers if you want to trade for guys to surround your two best players. You can't just have Jimmy and Bam being, and I know this is a point Adam has made a million times, but it's really true. You can't just have Jimmy and Bam being your only two big contracts if you're trying to also, add and be a trade team. And to me, like, that's where putting a guy like Duncan, it becomes a thing. Obviously, Tyler, you got to try to see if you could figure something out with I think the player options that we talked about in the past, and just try to see if you can find other ways through outside teams. I know we've talked about OKC in the past to try to pick up some other picks. I know there's a certain point also this offseason where they're going to have more available picks to trade, I believe. I don't know exactly when that point is, but I just think they're going to have to be looking down these roads where it's like everything you can to try to add Dame, because he's absolutely worth it. He's that type of caliber. But it's just, I don't know how you balance that line, in the short term, while you're also pursuing Lowry, and he might be pursuing you. So I just think it's, like what Adam said, it's do your best to do some,
I think the Heat would get priced out. That's what's going to happen, guys.
Right.
Like, unfortunately, some other team's going to come along that Dame will.
It needs to be perfect circumstances, right? It's got to
exactly
be
like I feel like what's that? The phrase with the bird in the hand instead of whatever in the bush. Like Kyle Lowry, if he wants to come, and Jimmy, that's his buddy. Like, I don't think we should overthink that part of it. But the timing does not lend itself to Miami kind of playing that game successfully.
Portland is not going to deal him unless they get an all-star, a fringe all-star type player to headline the package, right? Like, wouldn't they need, like, at the very least, like, let me throw this name at you. Like, wouldn't they need at the very least a Ben Simmons? Like right?
Jaylen Brown and 3 firsts.
I'll throw another name at you, a Bam Adebayo.
Right. That's what they would go after.
Right. Exactly. And to that point, every team in the league has enough assets to complete almost any trade.
Except
whether or not, except for sure.
Maybe.
It just depends on whether or not you want to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
And the one thing here is the good faith that has been built up with Dame in that organization. I do think that they will take into consideration where he wants to be, if that ultimately is where they go. I'm not so sure that they want a bona fide all-star in return. Actually, I think that like that fringe younger player that is going to become an all-star, because like they're going on for a full rebuild.
So are you thinking, but again, they're not a free agent destination. So you're thinking more of a Paul George to get a Sabonis and Oladipo type move, right? Like two guys who became all-stars in Indiana, right? But
Herro and Adebayo.
Right. You know what? This is such a good question. I really do want to get into the SPO stuff in our last 5 minutes, but I want to open the next segment with the Bam question, because I think that's really interesting here and controversial. Before we do, though, we'll tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Our friends over at Therapist Preferred. If you need some recovery after this episode, this is where you go. This is a CBD company founded in 2019 by physical therapists to maximize performance and recovery for active people. 100% THC free and third-party lab verified. All the products are made in the U.S. with cutting-edge technology from organically grown hemp. But again, it's THC free, so you're not going to fail a drug test. Don't worry about it. The most popular products are the CBD Sports Cream, the Strawberry Lemonade Gummies, and the Green Apple Gummies. And again, use the code 5 Reasons. They've upped the promo all the way up to 25% off your order, plus free shipping on all orders. Again, that's 5 Reasons, 25% off your order. I just did it this week. It's real simple. You just enter the code there when you go to the checkout page, and you get 25% off plus free shipping. So the code is 5 Reasons at therapistpreferred.com. Let's do this quickly. Would you include Bam Adebayo in a deal to get Dame Lillard? Adam?
Yes, if I get someone else in return. If I get someone else that is a star, you see, I've said it a bunch already, and I've said it a bunch already, and I'm gonna say it again. This summer will tell me if they're building around Jimmy or Bam, and to me, it sounds like they're building around Jimmy. So if you're going in that direction, I need a Dame type player. And if you're going to give Bam up, I need somebody else to come with Dame.
Who, though, on that team? I mean, Nurkic? I don't even know what
you still have the space. You still have cap space.
CJ.
No, it doesn't have to be from Portland. You still have cap space to do something else.
Go elsewhere. Yeah. You're saying that it has to be another player as well.
Right.
You're basically punting on your entire future if you're sending Adebayo out. You know what I mean? So, at that point, you better be ready to go up against Brooklyn.
And you're also yeah,
you can't have anyone saying like, "Oh, well, but there's still a couple pieces away from the Nets and the Lakers." Like, no. If you're gonna sacrifice the future to that level, you better be damn ready to have like a heat index on ESPN again.
Everything should be on the table. The whole cupboard should be gone if you're dealing Bam.
If you're dealing Bam, it is. I mean,
that is the whole cupboard. Yeah.
I mean, that is the cover. I mean, that's the one player.
I love that Adam mentioned like we're going to find out who the team is building around, because I had heard recently that if this team, if the organization was taking its cues solely from Bam Adebayo from a team building perspective, the number one target on his list would be De'Aaron Fox, I was told.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of point guard talk, huh?
No.
Speaking of point guards, watch TJ McConnell.
Okay, yeah, you know what? We're going to close the episode by going around with some information. But, Alex, I'll just let you do it. But you got 30 seconds because I want to get to the Spo thing here. I feel like this could have been 12 episodes. This is all going to get aggregated. Real quick here. Would you trade Bam to get Dame Lillard?
Bam is absolutely, like somebody I would want to keep under every circumstance.
Just answer it. Yes or no. Would you trade him?
Dame is the type of guy you trade Bam for. But I'm with Adam. Man. You got to get everything back. You got to go all in. You better not just have an empty roster around those two guys. You got to go all in.
Right. And I'm not doing it again. I'm not doing it if you're just getting Dame.
Right.
I need a third guy to come in.
By that end, by the way, by that same logic, I would also think Dame would want Bam on this team if he's coming over here. Like if he's leaving Portland after all that talk about how he was in a state of forever and all that, like I would imagine he wants to play with the two guys who got him to the finals a few months ago.
But this gets to the Shaq Dwayne thing. Remember 2004, the meeting where supposedly Riley thought he was getting recruited out to, coach or run the Lakers or whatever, coach the Lakers. And the Shaq conversation comes up and Shaq, it was clear Shaq was coming, but Dwayne had to be here. Everybody else could leave, but Dwayne had to be there. I wonder if that's where we're at with Bam, or again, if it's more of a Jimmy question. When you mentioned TJ McConnell though, Greg, that's another Jimmy guy. I mean, it's right. So it's another Jimmy guy. I do want to close here though with the Spoelstra thing, if we can. Again, I'm not reporting that an offer has been made or even an offer is being prepared. I've just heard that it's an idea that's been bandied about. And when I've heard this from two different people, it didn't surprise me. That's again, because that's who I would make a run at if I were them. I mean, that's who I would, right? I mean, you want somebody to run your organization who's had success and is from that area, has a family history in that organization. I would certainly at least test the waters here a little bit. But again, I'm not saying that he's going anywhere. And again, I've consistently heard that he's committed to the organization for the long term. But this does raise an interesting question, and maybe it's a question that we'll get into more in another podcast. Do they need to, in your view, clear a path for Erik Spoelstra beyond coaching? Because he has been now on the road for a lot of years. He's got 2 young children. He looked spent to me during the Whiteside years, and then I thought that he rejuvenated himself with this group, with Jimmy, with the bubble, and everything I've heard is consistent with that. But do you need to clear a path, and how do you clear a path when you've got if he ever wants to go to the front office, when you've got basically an all-star team and nobody's left? Like, that people left the coaching staff. Fizz left the coaching staff. Juwan left the coaching staff. Dan Craig left the coaching staff. Adam Simons had opportunities, is still there, right? Chet, I thought retired 5 years ago, is still there. Shane had opportunities, still there. Andy obviously has a significant and prominent role. And then there's Nick, and there's Mickey, and there's Pat. Like, do you need to clear a path for him to have more of a voice?
If I would have had one question to Pat on that presser, and I raised my hand a couple of times and then took it down because I was too far back in the queue, is succession planning. Like, I really think that's a topic that that the fans kind of almost deserve a little bit of a viewpoint, like not an opinion at all, but like a little bit of a look-see into what that looks like going forward, and who are the guys that are going to be the chief decision makers. Because, like, truthfully, the allure of Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg, like those guys have become like mythical figures now. And so it's a little difficult to envision them ushering any of them out. I would imagine Nick Arison wants a say at some point, but I truthfully believe that if it came down to giving Spoelstra as much control as he would get anywhere else, they would find a way to get that done. Don't you guys think that?
How do they do it?
Am I overplaying that? Am I overselling it?
But how do they do? I mean, that's my question, Adam. How do they do it? Like, I mean, they have.
Well, I think the more important thing is getting a successor to him as a coach. If you let him pick the successor to him as a coach, you're in business. And we've heard in the last few years that if you're in a room with Spo and Pat Riley, the last few years it's been Spo that's been selling the players more so than Pat Riley. So I think it's already there, you know, if Spo wants it. So to me, it's all about coaching. If you can find a successor to him, you're golden.
But they don't have a successor on this staff now.
That's why Spo's got to keep coaching.
I mean, if they had to pick one, it would be Quinn.
Right. Well, Chris is in the lead spot, but I don't know if he's I don't know if he's viewed that way.
You're gonna throw Quinny to Jimmy in a winning situation like this? Oh gosh.
Well, I mean, I thought Juwan was the successor. That's what I thought. You know, I mean, Fizz left. He went to 2 different places, and they obviously helped him get the Memphis job, and they told him not to take the Knicks job. And I still think that there could be a path for Fizz to come back. You know, but on the staff currently, and then Juwan leaves for Michigan, and obviously Dan Craig, you know, left for what, you know, more of a voice and more of a path with the Clippers. It's like
Dan Craig knew that thing was going to be a dumpster fire in the end, and he's going to get to slide right in as a head coach.
He might. He should get some looks somewhere else.
I just realized we don't even need to talk about this. The successor's already on the team. It's UD.
Oh man.
He doesn't want to coach. He's made that pretty damn clear. He does not want to
coach. So they can grab Luka.
Does anybody else have any other things they want to add here? Because I feel like this podcast is not that it's gone off the rails, but it's we tackled probably enough for 5 here.
Well, I guess the one thing that we can mention is, are you gutting the entire team for what would be 2 years, 3 years of Kyle Lowry? And what does gutting the team mean? Does that mean Tyler, Precious, they're all gone? And if so, how do you navigate that? I know it's a loaded question, but it's a question that they have to be asking themselves right now. Are you getting rid of, in a sense, Tyler and Precious, because you're not trading them for Kyle? And if you're moving them, what are you moving them for?
But why are we even throwing? I mean, no disrespect. You know, any sentence that starts with no disrespect includes disrespect. But why are we including even Precious? Is there even a path for Precious on this team?
Honestly,
Like, I don't. If he's not going to play with Bam, like, what are we even talking about? With
I mean,
Precious?
if you want me to take a guess, just a random shot, I think Precious is in Toronto.
Well, we've talked about
Yeah.
that before.
No,
Yeah.
like in the sign and trade that I've always envisioned,
Right.
Precious has been one of the guys that
Yeah,
I
they
thought
like
would
him.
go back there.
They
That
like
makes
him.
sense.
We've reported that.
I don't think they got the roster for Lowry at all, and I don't think, Adam, that's what you were insinuating.
No.
But I think what your larger point is like, if you're gonna go with this Jimmy Kyle thing for the next 3 years or whatever it ends up being, because I do think a 3-year deal is going to be what Kyle's trying to get, and maybe a team option on that last year. But like at that point, you kind of don't have time to wait around for any of these young guys. So it's like, what do you do and how do you navigate that? Herro is at his lowest value. So like Ethan, when you talked about him potentially not being here, I find it difficult for them to not go into next season and have the ability to try to
he's not on Jimmy's clock.
Yeah. That's
And
just
it's
true.
even-
He's not on Jimmy's clock. That's why I keep coming back to this. And we've talked about it. Jimmy mentioned him a lot in the post games in the first year. Tyler Tuesday was none of that the second year. And I'm just saying he's not on Jimmy's clock. I mean, it's not to say he can't become a really good player in the league or that he couldn't become a good player here, but Bam is more on Jimmy's clock. Bam is further along. Bam is a little bit older. Bam has, all-star experience. If you're going with Jimmy Butler, which is what they're doing, they're maxing out Jimmy, then it's like you said, if they were building this thing around Bam right now, it would be De'Aaron Fox. It would be a younger type piece. They're going in for Jimmy. That's everything that I'm sensing is that's where they're headed. And that's Kyle
the problem,
Lowry.
though.
What's that?
That's the problem. If you're going all in on Jimmy, Tyler Herro's not making a lot of money.
I know.
There's not a lot of contracts out there that you can match that'll be on Jimmy's timeline.
Yeah.
So they're in a tough spot.
The other
You got
question,
to opt
be a
in
part of a
on
bigger-
Iggy.
the
You got to
other
opt
question,
in on
guys,
these guys.
is can they, and maybe they can because none of the Nets never have more than one of the big three at a time or two, but like, can you beat the top teams in the East with another podcast entirely, which we've kind of done, but can you beat them with Jimmy Butler as your centerpiece right now? And that
Next 2 years, I think you can. I really do.
okay. Well, if you're talking about beating Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Brooklyn, which is primarily where it's at. I mean, again, Atlanta, I don't know what that's going to look like and whether they keep Collins and how much they keep developing, but we're really talking about, can they get past those teams? I mean, they have to make that calculation. And then there's the other calculation that comes into this, which falls into the Spoelstra stuff, which is, what does Pat Riley see as his own clock running the organization? Which if he's looking at himself, even if he's not saying it publicly, as maybe 2, maybe 3 more years. Again, the biggest lie ever told is that Pat's going to go retire to Malibu, right? But but if he's looking at his own clock as 2 or 3 years in terms of really wanting to run it as a full-time thing and not, then you are on Jimmy's clock. You're on. I mean, you're trying to go all in now. You're not waiting for Bam.
Yeah, know that.
We got a lot to get through on the next few podcasts. Aggregators, please.
Let me sneak 2 in here.
Oh no, don't. We gotta have NBA.
No,
Central
it's super small.
Okay.
TJ McConnell, that's only if they emptied out the backcourt. And
Mm.
so the last few years, I have dropped some unknown names on Twitter of players that you should watch for in the draft. And I have another one now, and I'm not going to tweet it. I'm going to put it on the podcast so that people have to come here to find it. Watch for a shooting guard by the name of MJ Walker out of Florida State. That is a player that the Heat have scouted heavily and will be looking into as an undrafted player to target in the event he makes it past the second round.
Great name.
Just a couple of players that you've mentioned before, Max Strus and Duncan Robinson. So just if people are questioning the information, there you go. Prizepicks.com, use the code 5, markbrownpa.com, do your estate planning there. Also get your title done if you're involved in real estate. And therapistpreferred.com, 25% off with the code 5 reasons. All right. Enjoy. We'll see if we have more information the next time. Please quote me accurately.